All right, welcome to episode 34 of the Long Toss here on the Walk-Off. In honor of the Phillies advancing, we're going with a Phillies great who wore number 34. This one's kind of cheating, but Roy Halladay wore 34 for the Phillies. So we're going to sneak some Blue Jays content in there as well. There you go. I am Adam Mack, joined as always by Scott Belford. Scott, how you doing today?
Just really deep into these MLB playoffs, buddy.
Enjoying the playoffs,
I literally watched 12 hours of baseball yesterday.
I know, and then you fell asleep at the best part.
Fell asleep in the sixth inning of the Phillies or the Padres Dodgers series. Yeah.
All right. We got lots to talk to today. Let's just go around the horn before we get started. Baseball, Jen, nice to see you as always. How you doing?
I'm doing well. It's weird because it just sort of hit me again yesterday that the Jays are like really not playing baseball anymore, right? And I'm not even that upset about it. I'm more angry or annoyed than like actually upset, but I don't know why it hit me yesterday. I was like, oh, interesting. So
I got to about the midpoint of the week, and I was finally over it, and I was ready to enjoy playoff baseball again. So it's nice. New face on the Long Toss here, Juan Forno. I know we've had you on the show a couple times now, but it's nice to have you on the roundtable discussion. You were at the game in Seattle last night.
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me. Games. It's literally 2 games. Trying to recover physically. My body hurts today from standing and cheering and praying and hoping and, coming up a little short and then drinking my sorrows away afterwards.
Yeah. Did they keep serving alcohol throughout the game, or did they cut it off in the 7th inning and give you 12 dry ones?
Yeah, they gave us 12 dry ones, man. We got to make a rule change here. Once you hit the 12th inning,
Yeah.
1 drink limit or something.
Open them back up, right? Give them a second chance here.
Yeah.
All right, Joel. Hey, Kami, what's going on? Nice to see you.
Yeah, I'm just out at the farm right now, so I don't know how my if I'm coming in clear or I sound pretty rough. At least my video looks like it's pretty rough, so I'm only assuming that I sound rough,
better.
I'm
than
doing
you
well.
Look.
I'm doing well.
You sound better than you look. Did you
You
catch
look
it?
as good as you
That's
can.
usually the case. That's how it usually goes. So,
All right, and then lastly, Julia, it looks like you're on mute, but if you want to unmute yourself here.
Hi
and,
guys,
hop
can
in
you
with
hear
an
me?
Intro. Yeah. you bet.
Gotcha.
Nice.
Thanks
I'll be with
for
an
joining
intro.
us. Yeah.
I'm Julia freaking Kreutz. No, I'm kidding. Hi, I'm Julia Kreutz. Nice to see all of you.
Nice to see you. Okay, we got lots to talk about today, so let's hop right into it. Phillies upset the Braves. Padres upset the Dodgers. Astros upset Mariners fans. And the Yankees have their backs up against the wall. We're going to talk a little bit of Blue Jays stuff later in the episode, but I want to start with this, and then we're going to talk each series in specific. The new playoff format. How's everybody feeling about that? A lot of rhetoric online that this has ruined baseball. The 162 games mean nothing, and it's all about this tournament at the end. Garth, you're here.
I am. A friend of mine just showed up. I'll be back in like 2 minutes. I'm just bringing him. I gotta go grab him some smoked fish, but I'll be right back.
Okay, you deal with your smoked fish, Garth.
All right.
We got our priorities in order. Love to see
I love this show.
I love this so much. This is great. Okay, let's start with this playoff format. Scott, let's go to you first. 162, followed by a weeks-long tournament. What are your thoughts on this?
I honestly have loved it. I mean, it's been just amazing baseball to watch. I mean, I was just talking with you before we hit record, Adam, about how even the wild card series where the Jays lost, and of course I'm super emotionally invested in that, so it hurt and it sucked, but the games were great. Like, if you're just a baseball fan, taking the Jays fandom out of it, like, that was an incredible series. Even the 4-0 loss with Manoah was entertaining. You look at all the wild card series, they were really fun to watch. I mean, the division series, a little something too You know, like all these people talking about the division series should be 7 games long. It's so many Braves and Dodgers fans right now, and I get it. They're upset. This just happened to them yesterday, but they'd be down 3 games to 1. Do you know how many teams have come back from 3-1 in Major League Baseball history? 14 since the inception of the game. So, like, why? Like, why change the format? I think 7 in the AL and NLCS is, and the World Series is fine, but I don't know. I've just really enjoyed this playoffs, and I'm surprised at all of the pushback about it, but I could be out to lunch.
Jen, what do you think?
I like maximum chaos. I'm not going to lie,
Yeah.
right?
Okay.
The whole anything can happen to any team, whoever gets hot at the right time, or, you know, if you want to say managerial miscues or whatever the case might be. I love it. And you know, as a fan, I think it's good for baseball, right? Just in terms of the excitement of it and the randomness of a lot of it, especially if you don't have an invested rooting interest in any of the teams. For me, this makes for really good, fun, watchable baseball. But I would imagine that it may not be as good for MLB's bottom line. So it would be interesting. I mean, they're the ones who changed the format, right? But I don't know that this is necessarily the outcome that they would have preferred.
Other than like TV ratings, what else would be the downside for MLB and the ownership group in terms of having expanded playoffs, having this as opposed to the 4 in the AL and 4 in the NL that we've had in the past?
Well, I'm just thinking more in terms of the teams that are being knocked out versus
smaller markets being in the World Series.
Yeah, that's what I was referring to.
Juan, how are you feeling? I know. Are you okay after seeing your Mariners exit in the second round? I mean, are you happy with how things went?
I am happy with the way things are going. And I think for me, this expanded playoffs really came down to making sure that deserving teams were still in the playoffs, right? And I think the fact that teams like the Phillies or like the Padres that are knocking off these behemoth 100-plus win teams just goes to show that giving these other teams that maybe won 87, 90 games is worth having in the tournament. I think it turns into a problem when you get teams into the playoffs that are below 500, but haven't run into that issue. And hopefully that's not the case going forward. I think everybody that made the playoffs deserve to be there. And I think it's showing with the quality of games, even against these, 111 win teams like the Dodgers did. So I like it personally.
I just don't feel like the quality of baseball is taking a step back. So what, baseball fans need to watch Bryce Harper and Juan Soto now? Like, it's like, I don't feel like this is any sort of a step back. It seems awesome.
Hey, be careful or they're going to expand playoffs further and we're going to have to watch Mike Trout in October.
No, that'll never happen. Let's be honest here.
All right, Julia, what are your thoughts on the expanded playoff format? What is the chatter and the vibe like around MLB.com with the other writers that you're working with? Is it an old school mentality or are people embracing this?
I don't think there's a lot of old school mentality at MLB.com, to be honest with you. I do think that most people who work there, vast majority really, are all for the changes, are all for sort of modernizing it, thinking of more dynamic ways to present the game. And I'm so sorry, Adam, it's really hard to focus because that finger, the foam finger, is jutting right from your head. And I'm really sorry, but it got me super distracted and all I wanted to do was giggle at that. Right. Where was I? Just gonna
There you go.
Okay.
Perfect.
Yes, MLB.com is pretty much all for changing the game, modernizing it, bringing it to different audiences. I think that we've been talking a lot about growing the game. And to be honest with you, when you look at the amount of underdogs and David versus Goliath and the way that things are going right now, there is an element of lore to it that I think attracts maybe a different demographic, a different type of fan. And sure, when you look at the big markets being knocked out, that does kind of suck. But at the same time, like if it was the reverse, would we be having this conversation that deeply, right? If the Dodgers were the wild card team eliminating a smaller market team that won 100 plus games, would we be having this conversation, or would we be all in on the underdog? So I think that there's also a level of how prominent is the fan base online? Who are we listening to? And what are we looking for? To me, as just a baseball fan, it has been pretty fun. I'm not going to lie. It's been pretty fun. And to be completely honest with you, I would love to see the Cleveland Guardians pull this off, or at least make it a 5-game series, because to me, their brand of baseball is so different from the Yankees, and it has worked for them. It's pretty unbelievable that a team this young has been this successful playing small ball. To me, that's pretty cool. So looking forward to seeing how that one goes as well.
It's just so nice to see an underdog with the meager payroll of $205 million like the Padres just, upset. Just good to see the little guy win,
It's funny, right? Because I think that San Diego sort of underperformed all season. I don't think that we expected the Padres to struggle as they did at points of the season there. Of course, the Tatis Jr. stuff, really, it's a hit, of course, on your team. But then you see Joe Musgrove do what he did in that wild card series. And conversely, you see Max Scherzer sort of implode a little bit, right? So it's not like the Mets won 101 games and then they got screwed over by the wild card format. It's that things really didn't go their way. And the Padres were the more deserving team at that point, as they were again against the Dodgers. So yeah, and still, when you look at the 162 games, I wouldn't say that it's irrelevant at this point. I think that especially if you're a Blue Jays fan, how important all 162 games are. Especially, I think that starting next year, when we have the balanced schedule, that's going to be a game changer as well. And it will work better with the playoff format that we currently have.
Garth, do you want to hop in here? Sorry, go ahead, Juan.
I was just gonna say to the Mets point, like Mets fans complaining, in a 3-game series, if you get to go Max Scherzer and Jacob deGrom and lose, you have no excuse. Like that's it. You don't deserve to move on if you can't win.
That's a great point. Absolutely. Garth, what are your feelings on this new playoff format? Is this good for baseball? Bad for baseball? What are your thoughts?
It's good for baseball. More teams can cheer, or more fan bases can cheer for their team to maybe squeak in, and like look at Cleveland, Philly, those fan bases have not had the best of times lately, and they're in and they're making some noise, and that's great. When people say, "Oh, it could be bad for baseball," like give me a break, man. Like the Dodgers and the Yankees, and who gives a shit? I'm happy when they get beat. They have such an unfair competitive advantage already, and they're crying because they don't like a 3-game series or a 5-game series. Are you for real? You guys get to spend unlimited amounts of money whenever you want. You get to pick and choose which free agents you want because they all want to play for your team. And then, oh, boo-hoo, our team lost in don't give me that shit. It's great for baseball. It allows the entire league to have a chance, to compete. Not just the playoffs, but you get it. You might be able to get into the playoffs. And these small market teams, that extra money that they get from being in the playoffs, that goes a long way to making them more competitive again next year and the year after and the year after, where they don't have to they don't have the same problems that New York has. Even the Mets, like we were saying, you can roll out Scherzer and DeGrom in a 3-game series. Only certain amounts of teams have the payroll to accommodate 2 guys that are making $70 million. So I think it's great for baseball. And it might not be great for the Yankees and the Dodgers and all the teams that everyone, thinks that like are important, but they're no more important than any other team in the league.
More parity is what we want in our sports, right? Like,
yeah.
Go ahead, Jen.
Well, if you think about that 162 and whether or not it's meaningful, how much fun was it even that the Baltimore Orioles made a run for it after being sellers at the deadline, and as Blue Jays fans, we were legitimately concerned about facing them in some of those games because it could swing one way or the other, depending on, if the Orioles could kind of keep up the pace at which they were playing. So that was great for them. That was great for baseball. It was exciting. And it absolutely means those 162 games are meaningful.
So it's not like these teams scraped in under the wire. Like the Philadelphia Phillies are literally the least winningest team this season to make the playoffs. At 87 wins, 12 games above 500, like, this is our low watermark. Like, I don't see what's wrong with that.
So to play devil's advocate, and then hey, Kami, we'll get your thoughts on this. But the pushback that I always heard during like the lockout negotiations, the players were pushing back on expanded playoffs. This is something the owners wanted, right? More revenue, more playoff revenue is good. The players were worried that this would be easier to make the playoffs, so less spending, right? There would be less push from the big dogs. I didn't see that this year. And to Jen's point about teams like the Orioles, I think this means more than ever that those small market, those fringe teams are going to be motivated to spend because the prospect of making the playoffs isn't so daunting in the first place. And then, as we see from the Braves last year, the Phillies, the Padres this year, once you get a ticket to the dance, as the cliche goes, right, you can go on that run. So if I was the Baltimore Orioles and I was close this year, I would be going all in on free agency this offseason, right?
And that is the plan. It seems to be the plan, at least when you hear their GM talk and stuff. And honestly think that Blue Jays fans are kind of in for a treat again in this series, in this AL East, because the Orioles are going to come back with a vengeance. And to your point about the trade deadline, I think that the Juan Soto trade alone in itself sort of debunks the theory that teams would not spend at the deadline, right?
Agreed.
That was historic stuff. So yeah.
Well, even for the teams at the very top, like the Yankees, if we've got the Rays, the Jays, and the Orioles now, just by default, the Yankees are gonna have to go out and throw a bunch of money at Aaron Judge this offseason.
I was thinking
about Garth points. I love your point, Garth, about the competitive balance and just that you really don't. It's almost evening the playing field a little bit, these playoffs, for the reason that, like, you never do hear players say, oh, well, I want to go to the Midwest. Please let me go home to Ohio where my heart is.
Send me to Cincinnati.
Everyone's always like, my heart's in LA, right? Like, so.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking about the Yankees today, and it's a little bit off topic, but like they're an older team. Yes, they have some young guys coming up, but I mean, young guys come and go. They flame out all the time. If they don't sign Judge, like, and they've kind of swung and missed at some free agents the last couple of years. Like they were kind of in on, like, they wanted Correa and like they wanted a shortstop, but they didn't get him. And the Yankees could be bad next year. Like, I mean, I'm not saying they're going to be a 50-win team, but like, if they don't get Judge and they don't, pick up somebody else to replace them, like, they're not as great as their record showed this year. They you're going to run out Donaldson and IKF again next year. Like, man, the Yankees, they got a tough offseason coming.
You got to feel for IKF, eh? When Gallo left, it's just like he's now the lightning rod for all of that Yankees hate.
Well,
like,
him and Hicks. But
one lone
Hicks,
man.
Yeah. Like him and Hicks have just been getting beat up like all season. But
yeah,
I could see them regressing substantially if they don't have a good offseason.
Baltimore is going to be tougher to play, but the balanced schedule is going to help the Yankees, just like it's going to help the Blue Jays and pretty much every team in the AL East. it should be interesting to see how this all rolls out with a much more balanced schedule.
I think it's also crazy the fact that not once have any of us even mentioned the Red Sox, which is a massive market team in that division as well.
Yeah.
You know, talking about these four that just are the three that made it and one just missed out. And the Red Sox are going to play to compete, right? They're going to try and spend money and get back into it because they're a proud franchise that doesn't take not making the playoffs lightly too. So that AL East is wild.
Yeah, no punting for the Red Sox this offseason, that's for sure. It was a
but
weird year for them, but they'll be back.
Since they traded Mookie, it's like, do you really want to be competitive? Like, I don't know. They need a lot more than a good offseason. They're not
cousin's a big Red Sox fan, and I like to troll him and just like text him things like, "Hey, do you think Mookie's curse is going to last longer than the Babes?" You know, just like
that's funny. Nice. All right. Well, let's. We were touching on Aaron Judge. Let's talk the Yankees Guardians series here. Only in New York can you hit 62 home runs and then get booed 2 games later by your own fans. Julia, let's start with you. And what were your thoughts on that? Aaron Judge getting booed in New York. Just
okay. So that's a tough one to lead off, but I'll do my best. I, as a baseball reporter and someone who's not really a Blue Jays fan, I do think that from time to time, Blue Jays fans are a little light on their players, on the way that some players, perform. Starting pitchers, absolutely. And I wonder if this were a different ballpark, what would be happening right now? That said, you don't just boo Aaron Judge. That is a lack of foresight that I think may hurt them in the long haul. Because if you're a guy who is about to walk out and is going to command a lot of money in the offseason, what are you going to remember? And that may have been his very last game at Yankee Stadium in the year. That is the last impression that you leave your superstar with, who may walk out the door. I know that fandom is about heart and not mind, and that's fine. And it's very easy for me to sit here and be like, oh, they should have been more logical about it. And look, I'm not logical when it comes to certain things, especially fandoms, but I do think that hurt them, and it's also pretty unfair given everything that Judge has done this year. So I was not on board with that.
I saw Aaron Judge's post-game comments after getting asked about that. And again, he just says the right things all the time. You know, his answer was like, yeah, I don't know. I haven't been producing. So what can I expect? Like, I deserve to be booed. I got to play better.
Those 8 at-bats, they should hang me over.
It's just like only in New York would that sort of thing happen. And Julia, that's a great point. Like, it's the last thing that he's going to remember. Even if it's only a 5% factor in his decision-making this offseason, it's hard to imagine that's not going to be in his mind, right? Like, after seeing what happened to Joey Gallo this year, just the treatment that he got in New York until he was gone. And if Aaron Judge signs a big money contract and then struggles in April, that is going to be a nightmare experience for him. Juan, what are your thoughts on Aaron Judge? Everything to do with the Yankees and him, that relationship. Do you think he's going back to New York next year, or is he going to take some serious consideration in free agency?
I'm on the other side, actually. As somebody that played, I like that they booed him. I'm on board with it. As a player, like, you're not playing for the individual stats, you're playing for the win. And you want to win those last games. You want to win in the playoffs. And if you're not performing, that's on you, right? This is a guy that wants to command, $35 million a year. It's great that you had an all-level season, but when it comes down to it, you ask Aaron Judge if he'll trade those 61 home runs for a World Series, I guarantee he says World Series every time. So that's when you got to perform. And if you want to get paid, that's when they need you to perform. my opinion, I would trade half those home runs for them to make it to the World Series if I'm Aaron Judge. So I say boo away. I say demand a certain level of product from your players, and if he can't handle that mentally, and that's gonna be what chases him out of the biggest baseball market in the entire world, then I don't think he deserves to get paid there. That's just my take, though.
So,
I
Juan,
say
you're okay
boo
with
away. I say boo away are words to live by. So thank you for that.
Juan's fine with 31 home runs from his right fielder. That's
what 31
what a softie.
Jen, what do you think of Aaron Judge? Do you think he's going to get a payday that a team regrets, or do you think he's going to live up to the contract that he inevitably gets this offseason?
I mean, nobody ever lives up to the last few years of these major contracts, right? So I guess it depends on how you look at it. If he signs with a team and that team wins a World Series and he is a significant contributor, then yes, he is worth the contract, regardless of what he does in the last 2-3 years of it, right? Like that's the whole point. And, you know, to what Julia was saying, I agree. Like I do think a lot of Jays fans are often a little bit light in their criticism or their lack of criticism when there are certain blatant things. I did not cover the team for very long. But the whole notion of having to erase my fandom to do so, I think like I still carry over. And I think that's why I have a tendency to be a little bit critical, and I take a lot of shit for it on Twitter, a lot of shit for it. But I stand by everything that I said, you know, because you have to demand better, right? It's the fans that drive the markets, and you have to absolutely demand better. Would I have booed Aaron Judge? I don't know necessarily, right? Like it does seem like a pretty harsh reaction, but you know, those 62 home runs they've already applauded, they've moved on. It's now we need to win this, and that was great, but that's over. We already gave you your props for that. Now you need to perform here. So good. I mean, I don't know.
I mean, in Aaron Judge's defense and even Yankees fans' defense, there are 8 other freaking guys on that field while he's not performing that are also not performing. I know.
Absolutely. Yeah. But, you know, he knows what it is to play there, right? He knows exactly what it is to play there. He's a professional. He gave an excellent post-game answer. And I honestly don't think that that's going to factor into his decision, to be honest. I think if he was going to sign with the Yankees, he's still going to sign with the Yankees. And if he wasn't, he isn't.
I think he's gone. I don't think he's signing with the Yankees. But you know, they're talking about like winning. You know, they want him to win a World Series. That, you know, they're booing him because it's the playoffs. Without Aaron Judge, the Yankees do not sniff the playoffs this year. Like he was that dominant. He carried that team. In July and August, he said, "Okay, get on my back. We're gonna win no matter what." You know, when they were running out guys that had, you know, stretches of like a month where they weren't hitting, you know, where their OPS was like 550 for like 40 games. And Aaron Judge said, I don't give a shit. We're still going to make the playoffs, you know, like, so to boo him, I don't know. Like, I get Yankees fans are passionate. I'm a passionate fan with the Jays, but I'm also a realist, and when our best player by a country mile is going into free agency and I want him to return, I'm not booing him because he's on an 0-for-7 slump. Like, that's just insanity. You know, there are plenty of guys on that team that deserve boos. Donaldson's making $25 million a season. Is he worth that? He's making more than Judges this year. Like, boo him. You know, boo Stanton, who you still owe like what, $140 million to until he's 68 years old. Like, boo those guys. You know, like, don't boo Aaron Judge. That's insane. But I think he's gone, and I think he's going to San Francisco. The Giants are looking to,
hard in California, baby.
the Giants are going to look to spend this year. They have some money freed up. He's a Bay Area guy, so I mean he's not signing with Oakland, so I think he's going to go to San Francisco. I think they're the team that's going to offer him those extra couple of years that gets the job done. So, but yeah, like booing Judge it's insane.
Joel, I want to go to you now before your farm internet cuts you off again. I see you've been hopping in and out.
I'm using my phone now. I think it's working.
Oh, there you go. Smart boy. So we got a comment here in the YouTube live chat, but this ties in. So from Scott Carter says, off season may be stalled a bit until Judge and Correa are settled. Do you see it playing out that way? And how long do you think it takes before Judge and Correa jump at a big bag of cash?
Well, if I'm Judge, I'm hearing all the offers. I there's nothing that's pressing me to make my decision. I want to hear what's on the plate from everybody. Correa is an interesting one, especially from a Blue Jays perspective, where I'm still under the idea that you got to move Bo to second base and get a legitimate shortstop, and this is the year to do it with the shortstops that are hitting the market. But yeah, it's for the teams that want a piece of Judge. Let's say 10 teams are legitimate on sitting him down and offering him something. Not 10 teams are legitimate on having a chance at him, but about that, we'll probably sit down with big offers. And then that's the money piece that could hit $400 million. That could be the price tag that you're looking at the end. He said no to 218. Cole makes 325. Stanton makes 350. And for him to say that he's not better than both of those guys, which he is, so he should be able to take more than that. So you're probably looking at 380 to 400 on what he's signing. So that is like, and then when that domino falls, there's no similar domino out there, right? So your entire approach has to change once we're in for Judge. Okay, Judge is gone. Now everything changes because that allotment of money that you have to put away to even talk about Judge is now available, and you can get you can get Tampa Bay for that price tag. So what do I think about Judge leaving New York? For a homegrown talent to hit 62, to do what he just did, break the American League record, to be likable in New York, that doesn't happen. That doesn't, we just are bred to hate Yankees, but I don't think any of us has this personal hatred towards Aaron Judge. Nothing about him fires you up on the inside that makes, I hate this guy, man, except for his talent, right? So to be in that place where you boo him, they even said on the broadcast, they were happy to say this is the worst fan base in all of sport. And that was just, casually said on a national broadcast in front of everybody. Hey, this is the worst, this is the worst fan base to be a part of in all of sport. Oh yeah, I agree. And that's what you hear.
That's the color commentator. Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's just standard. That's just standard baseball flack that any one of us would give that fan base, right? So to be in the position where you're going to lose the one guy that other people don't hate, that's a hell of a position to be in. And if you're going to boo that guy, what are you going to cheer? What are you going to cheer? There's if you're going to boo 62 bombs. What? It doesn't get much better than that. You can't do much better than that. So I don't know. Boo away.
That is quite philosophical.
What's that?
I love the philosophical aspect of what you're saying. If you're gonna boo that, what do you cheer for?
What's there to cheer for?
That's the title of a book right there. Someone needs to write that book.
I love how many people have said boo away at this point in this.
Yeah, this is a great Halloween episode, so it's quite fitting. All right, I'll open this up to the floor here, but with the idea of the free agent market being stalled out on Carlos Correa and Aaron Judge, would teams, I'm more curious about the Blue Jays specifically, but Juan, you can weigh in with the Mariners, would teams be better off not waiting on and risk missing out on a Carlos Correa and going after, like, if you are in the market for a shortstop, go hard after Dansby Swanson or something like that right away and not risk missing out on Correa and then also finishing second in every other major free agent market? Just after watching the Blue Jays offseason last year and how much time we spent chasing Jose Ramirez only to miss out on it in the end anyways, I'm really curious. I don't think Carlos Correa is coming to Toronto, but if the plan was to move Bo to second and get a legitimate shortstop, although I do think he is a legitimate shortstop, would it be better to just chase one of the slightly lesser names immediately? Garth, let's start with you. Juan, you go ahead.
Sorry.
No, please.
I think you got to be realistic about your chances and your opportunities and what market you're in, right? There's only a handful of, like, maybe, there's 10 teams that are going to chase the Correas and the Judges, but let's be honest, there's 3 or 4 that are actually going to be able to land him. There's so much more that goes into factoring in as a free agent. I think they factor in, like, state tax is a big thing for professional athletes. Some states don't have income tax, right? So that could be the difference of millions and millions of dollars. That plays a huge factor. I also think there's something to say about the branding aspect of it, right? These players want to play in major markets because they're going to eventually hit that year 7, year 8, year 9 where they don't have it anymore. And they got to start thinking about careers afterwards. You know, if you're in a place like New York, think of guys like Derek Jeter or Mariano Rivera, Andy Pettitte, all these great guys through the 90s that set themselves up for success after their playing careers, to do basically whatever they want, right? There's very few guys that can get that done in a smaller market like Cincinnati. You know, again, going back to Joey Votto, because I love that man. It's a lot more difficult. So I think, like, for a team like Seattle Mariners, who just put in a bunch of money and decided Julio Rodriguez is going to be the face of our franchise, you got to go and be realistic about your opportunities. You know, I don't think it would be smart for them to bring in, quote unquote, another face of the franchise when you've invested so heavily in this 21-year-old kid that has as bright a future as anybody else. I say, go get a Dansby Swanson. You know, you're only a few small pieces away from being a legitimate World Series contender, and there's no point in, you know, being unrealistic about your opportunities to get these higher priced guys that in the long run honestly feel like it never really pays out, never works out. Look at Pujols with the Angels, you know. Cano with the Mariners is another good example. He signed a similar contract as Pujols did. And, you know, if you don't win a World Series, what's the point? You know, that's what it comes down to. You play to win the World Series, and I think these massive behemoth contracts, when players get to be 29, 30, 31 years old are silly. And if I was a general manager, I would do what the Yankees did and offer 7 years. And if he doesn't take it, let him walk, you know, because I guarantee you on that back end, he's not going to be nearly as valuable as he is in these first 2-3 years. And if you don't win the World Series, then you're basically screwing your franchise for half a decade.
Dansby Swanson is such an interesting free agent case. Like, he really is the guy that I keep looking at that I'm like, man, I wonder how much term and how much money he's going to make. Because he really is an underrated shortstop. He is so good defensively.
6 WAR this year. Like, incredible ball player.
Incredible on both sides of the field.
Mm-hmm.
And he's kind of getting overshadowed by Carlos Correa and Trey Turner. But I don't know how much better Correa and Turner are at shortstop than Dansby. I don't know.
Trey Turner is a free agent, but there's no way he leaves LA. Right? They just got rid of Corey Seager.
Unless LA wants in on one of the other shortstops, right?
Yeah, fair enough. They think there's an upgrade there with Carlos Correa, maybe.
They lost with Turner. And Freeman and Kershaw and like
the 11 other all-stars they have on their team.
I say give Swanson 5 years, $100 million, and watch somebody else go piss away an extra $200 million on one of those other guys.
I'm all for that. Like I haven't put it out on TikTok yet, but my entire off-season plan for the Blue Jays is Dansby Swanson at shortstop. No, that's everything to me. To me, he's so overshadowed. Such a great ball player, 25 home runs, and he's got that World Series pedigree, right? I think we need to bring that something like that here.
Let's say that the Blue Jays have decided that they're going to go out and get a shortstop and move Bo to second base. Let's just pretend, because that's what we're talking about, right? I don't think you'd want to wait for a team to sign Carlos Correa, because then every team that was in on him and didn't get him, they're all quickly pivoting as well, right? But to me, you want to swoop in and get somebody before everybody that's in on the big guys gets knocked out, and then they're also scrambling as well, right? You want to get your man. Mm-hmm. So,
Yeah, it kind of reminds me like when Edwin was walking away from the Jays, and we swooped in and got our man Kendrys Morales instead of, So
that's a whole other conversation, Garth. That's a whole other conversation.
I think there's something to be said though, and I think the Blue Jays have to factor this in. Bo Bichette is not signed long term, and I think he's probably got 3 years left, if I'm not mistaken.
26.
If they
26, yeah.
Yeah, they move him to second base, he's not going to resign. There's no way he's going to take that lightly. There's no way he's going to want to move off a shortstop, because he loses a boatload of money that way. So I agree. I have said this to Scott so many times, and I refer to Bo Bichette as E6. I think he's a second baseman, but I think he's not going to take that move lightly. I don't think he's got the maturity to handle something like that. And I think that you can pretty much kiss his extension with the Blue Jays goodbye if you do make that switch and sign a shortstop.
Counterpoint though. Anyway. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, guys.
I think he's gone anyway. I don't think he's resigning with the Jays.
Yep. Like, I don't think that there's going to be an extension. I don't know that either side necessarily wants an extension. So
there's already animosity between Bo and the front office. Like, they were squabbling over $30,000 last year in the pre-arbitration thing. Like,
that was to make a point. He turned that down to make a point, right?
No, I totally get that, but it's still within the collective bargaining agreement that is how pre-arbitration players get paid. There's he turned it down, but he seemed kind of pissed off about it. And I don't know. The vibes you get off him, I don't think he's re-signing. I don't think he's the guy.
I don't think he's re-signing, but I also don't think the Jays are offering him an extension necessarily either.
No, I don't think so either.
I think he's gone before the 3 years is up, to be honest.
I agree. I think he will be traded within the next 2 seasons. I honestly think so. Because they're not going to be able to sign him, Vlad, and Manoah. That's a lot of money. One of those guys is going to have to go, and it's certainly not going to be Vlad, and it's certainly not going to be Manoah.
I have a question here, Scott and Adam. When you guys sent me sort of the rundown of what we were going to talk about, I think one of the items that you had was something like, clearly some changes need to be made for the Blue Jays to, take a step forward. Are those changes marginal, or will they be a massive overhaul? And I'm curious to hear from you guys if you would consider a trade of a guy like Bo Bichette to be, conducive of a massive overhaul, or if you would categorize it as a massive overhaul, because I don't think right now that the Blue Jays necessarily have the farm system for a major overhaul. If they want to do that, I would say that would close the competitive window at this point. But if you're entertaining the idea of maybe letting Bo go before that 3 years is up, would that be categorized in your mind as an overhaul?
Well, this is an interesting topic that Scott and I have kind of gone back and forth on a few times now. Is how do you define a shakeup this offseason? How do you define, an overhaul or a rebuild? Because everybody seems to have different understandings of what these definitions mean. I do not want to see the Blue Jays get into any sort of a rebuild overhaul where missing the playoffs becomes part of the process again. Like, I don't like an idea where we go, well, Bo and Vladdy weren't it. We're going to try again with Moreno and Elvis Martinez and Ricky Tiedemann. That's our new core. Let's look forward to that wave again. For me, that's what the overhaul and the rebuild becomes. So I do think we can trade like one of them. We can get rid of a Bo Bichette or a Vladdy and not necessarily have it be an overhaul.
I want no prospects coming back. 0 prospects coming back.
What about the Fernandez and McGriff for Alomar and Carter?
Yeah.
Like you're getting we don't really see many of those trades anymore where there's like legit players for legit players. But sometimes like we had a hole at second base and we brought in Alomar and it was perfect. Like it was perfect for what the team needed. And we needed an RBI guy. And I mean, McGriff wasn't quite there yet. Like he wasn't the superstar Fred McGriff, but he was still a good MLB player. I think the Jays might need to look into something like that. Like I'm not saying it's going to be Bo, but like Teoscar or something along those lines. Like I think we need something like that where we could move out one great player and bring in another great player, but that have different skill sets that help this club.
Shake up the chemistry a
little.
little. Yeah.
The fizziest version of this shakeup that I can envision is where we get rid of a catcher. We move Springer into right field / DH almost exclusively. So he's batting 160 times a year. Teoscar is maybe gone. Lourdes is maybe gone. Bo Bichette has moved from shortstop to second. All of these can be done if we're willing to spend to also bring pieces in. But I think that could be the biggest version of a shakeup that I can see where we're not like rebuilding.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm getting at. Like we don't have to, get rid of like Orelvis and Tiedemann and like these prospects to bring in a superstar. We have guys on the roster that they're not putting us over that hump, and maybe we need to tinker. Maybe get somebody who's not quite as good at the bat as Teoscar, maybe a 20 home run guy, a 110 OPS plus guy, but plays stellar defense.
Or is also a left-handed bat, or
something like
this,
that,
right? Joel, what are your thoughts on this team and a shakeup? What level? I know you mentioned the Dansby Swanson vision of this future.
Yeah, your breakdown was pretty great. Like that's kind of how I envisioned it. Shift Springer to a corner outfield position, get a 24-year-old center fielder who I don't care about diving into walls because is like a 98 OPS plus guy, right? Like Trent Grisham is a great example of that guy, right? Like lefty hitter, great speed. He's going to go out there and dive for you, and you put him in the 8th spot, and if he performs offensively, it's a double boost, right?
What about Cody Bellinger?
That's interesting. Like I need lefties. You look at the postseason this year. We get dominated by Castillo. Astros, Tucker, Yordan hit bombs against Castillo. What are they? Lefties. Watching the Dodgers versus the Padres, and Cronenworth's going deep, and Freeman going deep, and Muncy's going deep, and everywhere. Where do these guys stand? They all stand on the left side of. They're all left-handed hitters. We got none.
Which Jays fans, we're not even used to looking to the left-hand side.
Don't even know
whenever
what
a lefty gets
are.
in the batting box, I'm like, where are they?
It's a completely different sport that we watch, and then we watch postseason baseball, and we see that 50% of the top 5-6 hitters in a lineup are left-handed or switchies, and they devour pitches that we swing at because they're 7 feet outside of the plate, sliders that they can throw to every single batter because every single batter's got that same approach. And moving Bo to second is Glaber's move that they did in New York. They mocked him forever at shortstop. He can't play shortstop. Now he plays second base, and that's done in one season. They don't mind him at second base. All the issues of Glaber being an embarrassment in the glove has gone away as soon as you just shift him 60 feet over, to the right. So I don't know. To me, those are the moves that you got to make. The sitting on your wealth of power at the catcher spot at the trade deadline, and then watching what a team like San Diego, who went out there. San Diego doesn't have their big star, but they went and moved for another big star. They upset the Dodgers, and you see that fan base. It's like they won the World Series, right? Just winning those games at home. They hadn't had home games in San Diego for 14 years, something like that. And it kind of has that feeling that, we got those home games, but it didn't really feel like we did everything that we could to make sure that we came out of those home games with a win. So those things need to be addressed in the offseason. I need 2 legitimate lefty hitters. I need both sides. And that means another shortstop. So that is a big overhaul.
Julia?
The Yankees did the same thing last year. They were supposed to be 4th and they got 1st. So I think we have to follow in suit.
Julia, I see you raising your hand there. You want to jump in?
Yeah, sorry. I do have to hop out in 5 minutes or so, but I wanted to ask Juan a question, actually, if you guys don't mind.
Please.
I don't want to co-opt your podcast here by any means, but
co-op away, Julia.
But we obviously, being in Toronto and being within this club and its fan base, we hear a lot of opinions from the Blue Jays perspective. And I'm wondering, Juan, as a guy that's based in Seattle, if your scouting report is or was similar to what you have heard so far from the Blue Jays side when you went into watching those wild card games. Was it the lefty bats? Was it the lack of swing and miss out of the bullpen? What was it for you that became the Blue Jays' undoing, and was it what you expected it to be?
That's a good question. I think, there's maybe a little bit of an overemphasis on the lefty to righty matchup. Luis Castillo is just a stud. Like, you ran into a good pitcher, that's going to happen. And I don't think you could come up with 5 names that hit from the left side that would have made a difference in that game that he pitched against Toronto. Our ace beat your guys' ace, and it was honestly maybe one pitch Manoah would have liked to have back, that 2-run home run to Cal. So I don't think there's necessarily a deep dive that you have to go into in terms of like scouting report for that game. And then, game 2, I hate to bring it up in front of all you Toronto folks, but it was a bullpen implosion, maybe you didn't go to the right guys in the right situation. But I think the team is in a good place. The bullpen is fairly deep. You got a good rotation. Obviously rotation didn't quite work out as maybe you had anticipated at the start of the season, but you got a good season out of Ross Stripling and maybe didn't get as much as you were hoping out of Barrios and Ryu. I think the plan was good, and I think maybe there is just little tweaks that need to happen to try and improve slightly, but that's why those 162 games matter. Don't put yourself in a position to be in that 3-game series. And, those 2 games where you run into a guy like Luis Castillo and then, have a bad day at the park, end your season. I think there's very minor tweaks. The Blue Jays have a very good roster and they're in a very tough division. I think they could easily win 105 games next year with this exact same roster, to be honest with you.
I sure would love to see this front office for the Blue Jays do something that they have literally never done under this regime, which is go out and spend money in the bullpen. The Blue Jays had $15 million allocated to this year's bullpen. The highest paid dude in that bullpen was Jimmy Garcia, who did an excellent job, but $5.5 million in a year, that doesn't exactly scream stud, scary dude coming out of the pen. I mean, there's a guy like Edwin Diaz available, right? And you look at what Josh Hader just did for the San Diego Padres. I'm well aware of his struggles after leaving Milwaukee.
Hey, we spent
he pull it?
We spent a bunch of money on Kirby Yates. Don't you remember that one preseason game he pitched for us?
That one bargain we got, where we're like, oh, he's injured, so no one else is paying him, so we can get him for $8 million instead of $13.
Let's
Technically, the highest paid reliever at the end of the season was Kikuchi.
Kikuchi, yes.
Yes. All right. On that note, let's pause this topic and let's say goodbye to Julia. Julia, thanks so much for taking the time to chat with us.
Thanks, Julia.
Thank you so much. Have fun.
All right. Cheers. Okay. With all that, sorry, Jen, you jump right back in.
Sorry, I wanted to go back to her point about whether or not trading Bo would be considered an overhaul.
Okay.
So,
Please.
First of all, I think the reason why he likely will get traded is because I'm pretty certain they've tried to trade him. We'll leave it at that. But I can very easily see him being traded in the next 2 seasons. If he's not going to resign, if he's not going to get extended, then get some value for him. You as a team, you can't let him walk at the end of that 3 years. You got to get something for him if you just don't see that relationship continuing beyond the 3 years. Trading Bo, to me, would not be an overhaul, but it would be that shift in front office mentality, right? Because the plan was, it was Guerrero and it was Bichette. This was their team. And I think we've seen it become Vlad's team. And so that trading Bo would just represent that little bit of a shift. Do they need an overhaul? I mean, honestly, we all know the bullpen is the reason why the Jays got bounced in that second game. But I would argue that they need starting pitching. They need 2 starting pitchers, right? And that where are you going to get them?
Yeah.
Where are you going to get them?
Depth was a real problem this season. Just
for
Jen, you're nailing it. Like,
it was a huge problem. And I know they're going to give Kikuchi every opportunity to make that rotation, and they should, because they've spent the money on him, and they're going to work with him all off season and see what they can do, see if they can mold him into what they envisioned in the first place. And he'll be given every opportunity to make that rotation and see what they've got. But, okay, so if they get 1 starter and then Kikuchi's the 5th guy, there's still 0 depth there, right? Ryu's not back, and I would imagine Stripling's gone, let's be honest. So They have to sign at least 2 starters. And when you're talking about now, adding to the rotation, adding to the bullpen, doing something with Teoscar or Lourdes so that you can move Springer to a corner, either moving Bo to second or trading him altogether. Now I think we're getting into at least a mini overhaul.
An underhaul, if you will.
An underhaul. Some sort of haul.
All right. I now have to leave as well. I have to take my daughter to hockey. Scott's going to run things from here, so I will just bid you all adieu. Juan, very nice to see you again. It does not break my heart that the Mariners lost. I'm glad you got 2 games for the price of 1 last night, and I'll leave it at that. I'm sure we have many more Jays versus Mariners series to look forward to. So hopefully a rivalry that we continue to build on over the coming years. Scott, the floor is yours, my friend. Thank you.
All right, Adam. Thanks so much, man. What a good dad, eh? Look at him go. All right.
I do want to make a point real quick here. I think it's interesting that we're even discussing the fact that the Blue Jays need a shakeup when, it wasn't so long ago this season they were a World Series favorite. I think they still can be, like I said, with this roster. It's a very, very good roster. And there was a reason that they were favored to be World Series players in the AL side. It doesn't always go that way, but it's a very good roster. And I think, to your point, they do need some starters for sure. And the starting rotation didn't quite pan out the way they had anticipated or expected. But I don't think it's time to trade a guy like Bo, who just led the AL the last 2 seasons in hits, and do anything too drastic just because the playoffs didn't quite work out the way it was planned. It's still a very solid roster.
My argument for trading Bo has nothing to do with the playoffs. I'll just state that up front. But it is an odd thing to be, not just the Bo conversation, but the overall conversation is really odd when you consider that they won 92 games, right? But the bottom line is a lot of those games along the way were quite dicey. And they got bounced in too, right? They did. And to go from being World Series contenders, favorites right up there with the Dodgers, to being bounced in too. And we can talk about reasons for that, top to bottom. but you might have to consider that there is a bit of an issue with the way the roster is constructed. And
I agree. Like, I do go back and forth in this, Jen, like where I do have those moments where I look at this team and, like you just mentioned, Juan, 22 wins is nothing to scoff at. And, especially if you look at some of the downfalls throughout the season that they did have, they did kind of fix them, right? Like, the bullpen troubles they had in May and June were really solidified at the trade deadline. But I don't necessarily see this as maybe a major shakeup, but we touched on pitching depth, and they are getting so much closer. You look at the guys, they have 2 top 10 in their prospect ratings there in Ricky Tiedemann and Sam Roberts, but both of these kids are still 20. They're probably going to both be playing in Bison uniforms next year, but that's still a pretty thin depth level at AAA. Like, I just don't want to see Casey Lawrence pitching anymore. And it's nothing against him. Like, I understand every organization has those guys, but it's one thing to see them once in a year. It's another thing for Casey Lawrence to get 9 starts or 9 appearances out of that. And this isn't even talking overhaul. Like, you don't need to do that much to improve that depth at AAA and have guys that at least can come in and give you 5 innings and only give up 3 runs. Like, we're not talking number 3 pitchers here, but just something in the minor league system. And then again, the bullpen, it's just like you get what you pay for. Like $15 million. Yeah, I think I looked it up. It ranks something like 14th overall on money spent in a bullpen. But if you look at contenders, it's not even close, right? Like, it doesn't even touch what the Padres and Dodgers are spending.
Well, we talked about it before, and I mentioned, like, you don't need 5 starters in a season. You need 8. Guys get hurt, guys get tired. They have an elbow strain. They need a couple starts off. We went into the season with 5 starters, and that was it. Like, and if Ross Stripling didn't have the season that he had, the Jays weren't making the playoffs. Like, he stepped in when Ryu got hurt and became like our third best pitcher. And then Kikuchi shit the bed. Barrios was as wildly inconsistent as I've ever seen a starting pitcher. Like, there was days where he looked like Sandy Koufax, and there were days where he looked, like Kikuchi. Yeah. And it was like, we can't go into next season with 5 starters.
I want just 3 more Mitch Whites. Give me 3 more Mitch Whites, like, of that ilk. Like,
give me 3 more. Give me 3 more Dodgers Mitch Whites. Don't give me 3 more Blue Jays.
I'd like to aim slightly higher than that, but
well, I want one guy.
But I get what you're saying. I totally get what you're saying.
Yeah.
Like, I want guys at AAA who, if we need a spot start, can come up, and I think we still have a chance to win.
Well,
there was no chance.
One of the problems is going into the season, they were anticipating some contribution from Nate Pearson, and that they need to really let go of. I believe.
Yeah.
But I saw talk on Twitter like a week ago, still suggesting that Nate Pearson could be considered for the rotation because of the payroll being what it is, and can the Jays sign anybody or trade for anybody? And these are roads that they've already explored, and I really don't want to watch this front office go down them any further.
To play to that point, like, when you look at free agent players that we brought in, okay, so let's go with Ryu, Springer, Barrios, Gosman, Kikuchi. Okay, how much money is that between those 5 players, and how much more did they bring us this season? Like 3 between all 5 of them, right? Barrios and Kikuchi were negative WARs. Springer can't play a full season. Ryu's off now this year and next year, so he's gone. So you got 2.5 years out of a guy. That's $500 million that you've allocated to 2 wins, 3 wins. Like, that's terrible free agent spending. You're going to go get a center fielder who's injury plagued and 31, and you're like, oh, he'll be fine. No, You don't know anything about the history of center field. Every single center fielder who clicks over to 30, their bodies fall apart. Just always for the history of the game. And then all these starting pitchers that we brought in paying extra money, and what do you get out of it? It's terrible free agent spending. Terrible.
I think going towards this like whole pitching depth thing, and obviously you don't know until you know, but a perfect example of what the White Sox did last year was give Johnny Cueto a non-roster spot, sent him to AAA, and then look at the season he had. I think that's the type of pitcher that the Blue Jays got to load up on and get that organizational depth with a Johnny Cueto that could turn it into, you know, even if you get him throwing 100 innings at, you know, 4.3 ERA, that's a great signing right there. And I think that'll add the depth and make the team what it needs to be.
So we'll shift gears here a little bit. I did want to bring up contract extensions because we just watched the Seattle Mariners, your front office there, Juan, go out and lock up their stud, shining star, Julio Rodriguez, who is just people in Seattle looks like they're ready to bleed for the kid. I mean, he's definitely an exciting player to watch. Does anyone in this panel believe that this front office with the Blue Jays has it in them to make one of those extensions? It is the one thing we've yet to see this front office do. We've seen them go out and spend major in free agency, which had not really been a thing that they'd done before they took over as the front office. We've watched them go out and make trades and get you know, under the radar deals, if you will. We've watched them really be good at management other than the locking in their own young talent. Do you think this is by design? Are they just kind of, these guys are cheap right now, maybe we sign them at free agency, but most likely we're just going to build this farm of guys constantly coming up? Jen, I'd love to hear what you have to say.
If I had to guess, I would guess that they've approached Vlad relatively seriously. I've always stated that I think Vlad is going to want to see what free agency has to offer, no matter what, right? He grew up with money. He grew up in a baseball family. And I don't think he is going to be eager to just sign the first contract that comes along because it's the first time that he's ever seen money. He has too much baseball knowledge to do that. So I don't think that they can sign him to an extension. But I think they'll try. Manoah, I also see being the type of guy who is going to want to bet on himself. And I don't imagine that he would, you know, especially coming off of the season that he did, I don't see him being interested in talking long-term deal either. So when you say, do they have it in them, the front office? I don't know. I just don't think it's going to happen regardless. So it's hard to gauge whether or not they have it in them. I don't know what dollar value they could throw at them. I don't know what constraints ownership has put on them in terms of spending.
Jen, do you think they've lost their window for that? Like when it comes to the guys you just mentioned,
yes.
I know with Julio
yes.
and Wander
yep.
Franco, they were much younger. It's kind of, they're going to free agency, right? Joel, do you see that unfolding any differently?
Well, when Seattle can make a move on Rodriguez 10 years, when Tampa's making a move on Wander Franco for 10 years, when San Diego, a team that you know 2 years ago we would have thought that we're about the same level as San Diego, right? Similar market, right? We're Canada. We got a bigger market. No, San Diego's got a $200 million payroll. They sure up Tatis, and then they go after Soto, right? Like we don't feel like we're that team. We don't. To me, it doesn't feel like we can keep what we have, and that scares me because we are a massive market. Mm-hmm. We should be able to spend. We should be able to go out there and flex alongside of anyone, but we don't, and that really kind of pisses me off because you look at those fan bases, and those fan bases are happy to know that I can buy this guy's jersey, and it's going to be the same jersey for 10 years. You know, I'm some consistency on those stars, and then finally we get that homegrown group, and you're not willing to to go out there and lock these guys up. So to me, if you're not going to lock them up, then you've got to go and deal them for the players that you do want to lock up. And because that's what the Padres did. The Padres, even if they don't lock up Soto, even if they don't, look at Seattle and getting Castillo for $100 million, right? You bring them here, you bring the player in. The player has a good time winning. You want me to sign 5 years, $100 million? Sure, why not?
Yeah.
I'm having a good time. You sign the deal, and you've got, a guy making less there who's, better than Gosman. He's better than Barrios. He's better than Ray. He's making less. You have to be able to show that your management team is willing to go out there and do it, and not for, like I said, the $500 million that we spent on guys who are 30 and going into another stage of their career. It's like, that's not where you're supposed to be spending the money. Smart franchises are investing it early in the youth. Those are the jerseys.
I think Jen's right. I think the Blue Jays probably approached a lot of these guys and they said no. Vladdy for sure. He got that $4 million signing bonus to come to the Blue Jays, and his dad playing all those years. Like, the money was like, he's not struggling for money, and he's not going to struggle for money. So I don't think he was willing to sign an extension. I don't think Bo was the same situation, right? His dad played all those years. He comes from baseball family. I don't think those two guys were willing to sign an extension, and I think they missed their window with Manoah. But I don't think it's a lack of them wanting to in the front office. I think that if they're smart, they go and offer contracts to a guy like Kirk, maybe, or definitely Moreno. But I don't think they were, like I said, I think they tried to, and just given the circumstances, weren't able to get it done in a fiscally responsible manner. Like you're saying, spending X amount of dollars in free agency for those older players, there's got to be a limit to how much you'll be able to spend on these guys for you to be able to put together a winning roster from 1 to 26. So I don't fault the front office personally, but that's who knows behind the scenes.
Out of curiosity, Juan, what was the feeling around Seattle when Julio did sign? Like, could you feel the excitement in Seattle? Like, was it something that the fans were grateful of, or was it a little surprising to you and the fan base?
I think they were surprised by it, but I think they were very happy with the overall contract. I know it's big numbers, but had he not signed right now, he'd have been set to make a hell of a lot more.
It's a countdown to him leaving, right?
Yeah. He would have made a lot more money than what he's getting paid on this contract. And you locked him up in his prime. It's, I believe, 11 years that could be extended to 14 years based off of complicated mutual options. It was a hell of a signing, and I think it was a very different situation where there was this 21-year-old kid that didn't come from money and is not from the U.S. And had an opportunity to make sure that him and his family would be set for life. Whereas the Blue Jays players weren't really in that position to need that money as much as a guy like Julio did. And Seattle's excited to have him, and I guarantee you that man will never pay for a meal in the city ever again.
The thing that bothers me about the Jays, and this is like historically, this is like since 1977. We don't have that guy. We don't have Mr. Blue Jay. Somebody that we came up through the system, we signed him, played his whole career here. We've never had that player. And if we're not willing to throw every penny we can scavenge for a guy like Vlad to be that guy, that's just it bothers me. We let Delgado get away, we let him walk. We let all these players, I want a Mr. Blue Jay. I want a guy that you can tell people 40 years from now, yes, I watched that guy in his prime with the Jays. He retired as a Jay, his numbers up in the rafters. If we're not willing to do that for a guy like Vlad, overpay him, whatever. You don't think that Rogers is going to make that money back over the next 15 seasons? You don't think that he's going to be on every Jays promo before Sportsnet Central for the next decade and a half? It infuriates me that we've never had a player like that in Jays history. And, we're not a young franchise anymore. We're 46, 47 years old. And if we're not willing to throw that $400 or $500 million contract at a guy like Vlad, then I don't know what we're doing. Like he's seems like a good citizen. He's got no behavioral issues. He's got all the talent in the world. He loves Toronto. Toronto loves him. Just pay him. Pay him. He wants 35, 38 million a season. Pay him. That's going to be the going rate for guys of his talent for the next little while. And it might be a deal in 5 years from now. So I understand it. It's not up to the Jays. Like Vlad has some say in it, but wow him, say, hey, listen, this is what we want to do for the next 15 years. We want you to be like the Jay. We want you to be the face of the organization. We're willing to do whatever you want. What's it going to take? And just do it, man. Just do it.
That is such a good point, Garth, about there never being that homegrown talent that has been locked up for his entire career that we can look back on and think of as that is the Blue Jay. If anything, we have a long list of heartbreaks where guys have gone the other way. I know it was really eye-opening, and of course, this is from the player's perspective, so you never know. But we actually were lucky enough to have Sean Green come on the podcast and just talk about his negotiations with the Blue Jays, and it kind of surprised us that they did want to lock him up. But the one thing that he really pushed was that the only way he wanted to stay in Toronto if it was him and Delgado, because they were very similar to Bo and Vlad, that they both came up the system together. They both were those hot shot young rookies. They both were, competing for batting titles or stealing 30 bases and hitting 30 bombs. Like they were really right there side by side. Green and Delgado, everyone was saying their name, right? And the thing that the front office told them was that we can keep one or the other. And that's why he went to free agency. That's why he went to LA.
And they lost both of them because of it.
And to look back on that and then to see what's going on right now with Bo and Vlad, and again, obviously, like, I'm not an idiot. I'm well aware that the player has to want to lock in as well. You can't force someone to sign. But your point, Garth, of overpay, wow him, do something, I couldn't agree more with, especially as you watch Vlad as a human being. Like, if there's one guy to put your chips in on, I feel like it's him, right?
Yeah, like he seems like even he's already at first base. He's been moved off third. He can play first base until he's 40. Like he can. And if he can't, well, fuck, he'll be a great DH until he's 40. He's always going to be able to hit. So, like, why not? Why not wow him? Say, hey, we're going to give you 15 years, whatever. Pay him 37 a season. I don't care. The Jays fans, like, I want a Ripken. I want a Mickey Mantle. I want somebody like that. And I think a lot of Jays fans feel similarly. They don't want to wait until, he's been here 7 years, so fuck it. I guess the Dodgers are getting him now. Like seriously. And for management to say that, we have to be fiscally responsible. Bullshit. These types of players don't grow on trees. We signed them in international free agency. We developed them. Just pay them.
I can't even imagine how excited the fan base would be to see something like a $500 million, 15-year deal contract thrown at Vladdy. And just the idea of, like, dads being able to buy their, like, 4-year-old kids Vladdy shirts and know that they can wear them forever, right? Like, just, like, going to games and being like, we can go to a game in 10 years and still sit and watch Vladimir Guerrero Jr. There is something kind of, for lack of a better term, romantic about the whole idea of that.
Well, if you were to throw away this season, which is a down season for him offensively, but still come at him as the way you should have came after him after his MVP runner-up season last year, doesn't that say something? This is the year.
Yeah.
That if you're going to this is the year you have to sign him. he's on a down year production wise, but say we don't care about that. We still have endless faith that you're going to be a 45 home run, 120 RB guy consistently for the next decade. Here's the money to say so. Just stop being a team that isn't a Major League Baseball team when it comes to the management. Every other team is doing this. The damn Tampa Bay Rays are doing this. You're telling me they can sign people long term and we can't? That's fuck.
7 fans.
Yeah.
Well,
Do you guys think that there's something to say about the positional value though? Because you said Tampa Bay, and a shortstop is way more valuable than a first baseman. You have a hard time replacing Franco as opposed to a Guerrero, and that's not a knock on Vladdy, but first base for shortstop, that's there's a big difference.
But you have to look at it like Rogers is business first. You know, like we're not owned by a fan. We're owned by a multinational heartless corporation. And Vladdy will put asses in the seats. They'll get people watching on TV. Because like I don't know if you know, but like Juan, but like the owner of our team owns the network that broadcasts the games as well. You know, they own every aspect. The journalists that get access to the Jays are Rogers. You know, like everything is for the company. And what? But
this is like such a bullshit trope by Blue Jays fans to say that they don't spend money. Blue Jays always have a massive payroll.
They spend money, but we've never thrown money at our homegrown talent that we grew up cheering for from like when they were in the minors.
And our max contract is $150. The max we've ever spent on one player is $150 million.
Yep.
That is not big spending. We may be spending a lot in a single year on the entire team, but we haven't put that investment out the way that pretty much every single franchise has at this point for some franchise player.
Well,
just
and so there's the two sides of that coin, right? Because I was thinking what Juan just said. They've been top 10 in payroll, right? Mm-hmm. But you're looking at it from the perspective of paying one guy big money over a long period of time. Part of the problem with having Rogers as an ownership group is that the Blue Jays are actually a relatively small part of their business portfolio. It's not making the money that we would think they're making based relative to the rest of their portfolio.
Yeah.
So they're only willing to invest a certain amount of money, you know, whatever percentage of return that brings back. I'm not a business person, but you get where I'm going with this, right? The dividends or whatever.
Which is why maybe it'll never happen, because truly, and Juan, you made a really good point about positional value and shortstop being worth more in the grand scheme of the baseball world than, let's say, a first baseman. But if you're going to sign a guy to 15 years, you got to take logic a little bit and just kind of throw it out the window to begin with, right? Like when you look at the Tatis deal, or you look at even the Wander Franco deal, you're throwing logic out the window a little bit, right? Like,
and I think other than Vladdy, who would have been that guy to throw that kind of contract out for the Blue Jays in the history of the Blue Jays, right? Like
Delgado.
Yeah.
Okay.
Delgado was
an absolute monster for the Jays, and everyone loved him. And like, I mean, the team was dog shit though. Like the team, like they weren't willing to spend money on anybody, let alone Carlos Delgado at the time. But like that was a guy. You know, like Sean Green was a guy. He could have been the face of a franchise.
Yeah.
Like, but I mean, it's been a while. And like I said, if you're not going to do it for a guy like Vlad, who are you doing it? Who are you waiting for?
But that's just it. I don't know that they are going to do it.
Maybe they're not waiting for,
I think they know, like, whatever money they make off of the team, and I'm including TV rights in there, like they know that whatever they spend, they know what they're going to get back on that expenditure, right? And overpaying, and it might be an overpay, let's say for Vlad, probably isn't going to make that many more people watch the games. Like their revenue is still going to be roughly the same. So whatever, and that's the thing, it's business heads, right? It's talking heads that are coming up with all of this. I'm not saying it's a great way to run a team, right?
Yeah.
What do I always say? It's not my money. Spend the money, right? Just spend the money. But
I mean,
that's not how they're going to do it.
If they're looking at risk assessment, what's the risk that in like 3 years we don't have Vlad or Bo and the team is dog shit again? And no one watches, no one goes to the park. Like, you know, they talk about wanting to keep this window of contention open. Well, to contend, you need good players.
I agree. I totally agree with you.
Vlad's pretty good, you know, and he's 23 years old, and he's gonna get better.
I would like them to spend this free agency and spend properly, right? Because there are some big name free agents out there, and that I'd like to see them go after. But I just, you know, all I've seen on Twitter, including from people who cover the team since the wild card series ended, is the lack of flexibility with this payroll.
Yeah.
And to me, now is not the time to say that there is a lack of flexibility, because the window is, at least in terms of your franchise players or who you are claiming are your franchise players, that window is getting smaller and smaller.
Couldn't agree more. Let's we've got 30 minutes left in the show here, so let's take a left turn and we'll go around the horn here, unless anyone has anything to add before we close up this topic here. But I figured we'd go around the horn and hear everybody's topics they're bringing to the table. We're good? All right, Let's do that. Joel, let's start with you, my dude. I'd love to hear what you're bringing to the table and what you want to talk about. Let's hear it.
It pretty much got shot out with the left-handed bat talk.
Okay.
That's all I want to really talk about is I just like what I'm just going to talk about it. I know it's overplayed here, but I do. I feel like a left-handed bat is required in Major League Baseball, not just because it's a guy standing on the left-handed side of the plate and he's attacking righties differently, but everything that history of the game has said that who's the greatest hitter of all time? Is it Ted Williams? Is it Babe Ruth? Is it Barry Bonds? Well, these three guys have something in common with each other. They're all left-handed bats, right? So when I look at this team, I look at the Dodgers and Bellinger, Gavin Lux, Freddie Freeman. They have a boatload of Max Muncy. Four legitimate guys out on that field who are swinging from the left side of the Padres. When I sit back and I look at a team that doesn't think that that's important, that makes my mind explode. It makes my mind explode that you could build a team and go, yeah, it's the OPS doesn't matter, man. He's got an 850 OPS. He's a righty. Who cares what side of the plate he swings from? I really do, because to me, it's a completely different hitter. It's a completely different hitter. When you're over here, the pitches that you face are completely different. Everything is drastically different, especially when 70% of the pitchers in Major League Baseball right now are righties, and some teams don't even have legitimate lefties coming out of their pen. So to have an approach where you don't have any legitimate lefty batters on your team baffles me. It just baffles me.
Juan, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, being that you played, and what a big difference it does make for a team to see, a pitcher to see someone on the other side of the plate.
Yeah, I mean, he's not wrong, but I mean, like for me, I thought Tapia was a great pickup, and it did feel like they did try their best to adapt to that, bringing in a left-handed hitter, right? Tapia hit like 270, which is pretty good outside of Colorado.
Hey, for a fourth outfielder, that's great.
You don't know what their options were. I don't think they necessarily ignored that, and maybe they just didn't get their options right. They're very aware. They know all the analytics. They know who can face who. They are very, very aware of all those stats. And sometimes you just don't get the guys you want to get. For me as a hitter, maybe it was when I was playing, and especially coming up until I reached college, there was not nearly as many left-handed pitchers as right-handed pitchers. And I hit right. So I was always facing right-handed pitchers. And as a hitter, you just know how to adapt and hit against those pitches. You know, if you're facing a wipeout slider, If it starts in, it's going to be a strike. If it starts over the middle of the plate and you pick up that spin, it's going to be a ball. They're professional hitters making millions and millions of dollars. There's no excuse to say I'm struggling because he's throwing with this side of the hand or the other. That's just my mentality, though. I know that splits will show up, but overall, I think it's a little bit overrated.
My other big thing was the fact that shifts being taken away next year, and lefties are never going to be more valuable than they are next year. Like, you might see batting averages jump like 15 points. You might see guys go up 1,000 points on their OPS. To not be prepared for that change, to me, says that they're like, how are you not getting prepared for this literal change of baseball that will occur next season? Because it's a different game next year when you have to spread out your defense.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think taking away the shift is stupid. I mean,
I do too.
If you're a professional hitter and you can't,
I absolutely think it's stupid as hell.
Left side, like, give me a break.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the Joey Gallo crybaby shit is just terrible and should have never happened. But you almost have to prepare for it, though, right? You almost have to, like, if you're a catcher coming up right now, right? The focus has always been on framing for the last 15 years. They're going to take away framing, right? So if you're a catcher, you want to start preparing on your blocking, your throwing, your game calling, because what you do have control in, right? Because they're going to take away framing from you. They're going to make robots do it. So that ability to frame pitches is going to be taken away. And it just doesn't seem like, with the shift being banned, it's like you got to prepare for that because the game's going to change. The game's going to change around you.
Do you all think that, and this is a lot of speculation and conjecture, but this is not a new problem that we are talking about with this Blue Jays lineup. This batting order has been heavy when it comes to right-handers for years.
For a decade.
And it's not like this front office isn't, a lot of the same analytics that everyone else is, and probably even a much deeper dive than any of us are privy to. Do you think it's possible that they were in so deep on the Jose Ramirez conversation that they had almost figured they had that problem solved, and then when that fell through, they were just left scrambling and didn't manage? Like, even the Raimel Tapia, which was a great point, Juan, but we'll all remember, this happened once the season began, is when they traded Randall Grichuk for Raimel Tapia. Do you think there's any possibility that this front office maybe got caught with their hands in their pockets after that deal with J-Ram supposedly fell through? And if so, do you think this is something maybe the front office learns from? And we talked about earlier, right, going all in on your man. Could we see this front office be more aggressive? Garth?
I don't think the J-Ram thing, I don't think they got caught with, their pants down with J-Ram. If they did, they should be fired. You don't bank on, well, seriously, you don't bank on your season banking on, trading for one of the 10 best players in baseball. You just, you have to have some sort of contingency plan. But, we've been right-handed heavy since, the Joey Bats Edwin era, and I think Tapia, I'm probably going to get shredded on Twitter for this, but I think Tapia is going to be better next year. The first 3 months of the season, he was almost unplayable. He was so bad at the plate. And then they're trying to get his launch angle up, because he was, well, you had Jack on here before, Jolly Olive, and he did the video on Tapia, and he's talking about how he was the best worst hitter.
Yeah.
His exit velo is when he gets into one, he gets into one. But it was just that change of approach. And it took him a while to get there. And I think with a full off season with the Jays and trying to tweak his mechanics, I think Tapia is going to have a good year next year. And whatever, shred me, I don't care. But I think Tapia will be all right next year. I mean, he's still going to be pretty terrifying in the field, but I think at the plate, I could see him hitting 15 to 20 bombs next year,
which at the bottom of the order would be very helpful.
Yeah.
Great topic, Joel. Love to hear it. Juan, what do you want to talk about, bud?
I want to talk about, and I made the mistake of somehow blowing past this when we did the Jays Mariners preview, but I want to talk about catcher toughness. I didn't give a shout out to my boy Cal Raleigh, big dumper, in that preview after he hit a full count, bottom of the ninth home run to send the Mariners into the playoffs after that 21 year losing streak. And then for him to go do what he did in the playoffs, it came out that he was playing the entire playoffs with a broken thumb and torn ligaments in his catching hand. Could you imagine catching a 103-mile-per-hour fastball from Andres Munoz with a broken thumb? I think that's insane. And I think catchers deserve all the props in the world for not being valued for their toughness.
Juan Forno, former catcher. No, but it's true. It is true. It really blew my mind to see that he was playing with a broken thumb, and bringing up Munoz is a great example of like, wow, the pain he must have been playing through. And I mean, this is what playoff baseball is all about. It's pretty impressive to watch guys, their injuries come out after the series is done, which is one thing I've been waiting for on this Blue Jays lineup. I'm like, how injured is Springer, and how are they keeping this so under wraps?
The thing with Springer is they haven't come out with the list of injuries because it's just like they're just going to tell us what's not broken on Springer.
Yeah,
like they'd have to have a separate conference, press conference just for Springer injuries.
Ross and Mark are going to have like this full-on 17 doctors at the table, talking about how they're going to rebuild Springer for 2023.
He's running the bases right now, guys.
And even more impressive, Yadier Molina for doing it as long as he has, being able to, a guy like Springer being hurt all the time, and then you go look at Yadi's career behind the plate and playing catcher the way he did, and still putting up offensive numbers in that way, as a testament to him and the incredible Hall of Fame career.
Sitting out much time.
No,
Yadi's been healthy for like 20 years, so man, that's impressive.
That's a next level athlete right there.
Go ahead, Joel.
Well, with the catching, it's going to be interesting because with all of the digital stuff that you're seeing to evade from sign stealing, right? Do we get a point like we're pretty much to the point where you're able to take away game calling from a catcher these days, right? So and like I said, with the framing being taken away, it's like the catching position. I think you may see, especially with one knee and guys going down on one knee a lot more often than they ever have. And that being kind of like the main, like a lot of that reasoning is to be able to frame the lower pitch, but also the longevity that it's going to give catchers, and it's going to be able to save their knees. I feel like you're going to see the position kind of almost switch more to an offensive position, right? Because they're depriving what it is to literally be a catcher by taking away the framing and the game calling. So now that those are in other people's hands, well, not the framing, but in the game calling,
it will be in a year. Like robo-umps are coming. You're right.
Yeah.
Man.
So it's just like it's a position where it's like you may see, your backup catcher become like a Mike Napoli type, where you're not so much worried about your backup catcher coming in and being this defensive guy who can catch one guy or two guys specifically, but you'd want a bat that you can count on coming off the bench as well as being your backup catcher and trying to get a little bit more player, try to expand how you use that backup catcher in that roster position.
That's such a good point, man, that I hadn't really thought of. Because even if you look at the Blue Jays right now, right? Alejandro Kirk is the best framer of the three catchers by a landslide. But the guy who's calling the best game is Danny Jansen, and all of a sudden game calling is going to increase in value and is going to make those catchers that are good at it more desirable. But it's going to make guys who are stealing all these strikes almost extinct unless they can hit. Like Maldonado with Houston, he's out of a job in 2024. Like, why do you need that guy if it's robo-umps?
I mean, you got to think about keeping the running game in check too a little bit, right?
Yes.
Somebody you can throw at runners, yeah.
Yeah.
It's just the skills that are sought after it's going to be a different laundry list come 2024.
It's really, really interesting how they redefined the concept of what a catcher can and can't be.
Okay. I'm going to jump in here with my topic, and then we'll get to Garth and Jen. I just wanted to talk the Los Angeles Angels really quickly. And I just wanted everyone's opinion on if it affects the players just being under that Angels banner. We just watched Albert Pujols last year get released by the Angels, picked up by the Dodgers, kind of reinvigorated his season, and then go to the Cardinals, and well, we all know what just happened there. We watched Brandon Marsh get dealt at the trade deadline, go to Philadelphia, and all of a sudden he found his bat and has been absolutely incredible. Noah Syndergaard, I know that he struggled the last half of the season once getting traded, but that was a big-time performance, those 3 innings that he put in just yesterday to push the Phillies past the World Series defending champs, right? So my question is there a hopelessness being a Los Angeles Angel?
Yeah, Mike Trout would hit 400 with 50 home runs every season.
Like that, I literally find myself thinking that. I'm like, how good are Ohtani and Trout really?
I think like losing a lot, like players just don't care anymore. You know what I mean? Like when you're just like, they had a 14-game losing streak, and that's demoralizing. And like in your head, it's just like, fuck it. Yes, I'm a pro athlete. Yes, I'm getting paid to do this job. And yes, I have fans and I should be playing 100% all the time. But you'll like Artie Moreno is one of the most hated men in baseball, and he's your boss. And, you just sometimes players, like, you can't blame them for just checking out. Not every player has the mental fortitude of a Mike Trout or a Shohei Ohtani. And these, mid-level guys, like a Brandon Marsh, like he probably goes to a new team and it's like, holy shit, this is how it's done? Oh,
wait,
man.
People care?
Yeah. I'm excited to be playing baseball again. And having that like shift in attitude, like it's probably going to help you play a little better.
To be a team like Anaheim and you're getting rid of like players like Brandon Marsh who are 23 and unrealized, like what does that say too, right?
What
like
does that say?
Right, this is like, what are you waiting for? Like this is a player who's got speed, he's got great defense. If that bat figures itself out, the bat looks good, right? It just needs to have the 1,500 at bats that you need in the majors to figure out who you are as a hitter. No, we don't have time for that. To me, it's like if you had a job, right? But and they give you a company car, but every single time you go to get in the company car, the tires are flat, and every single time. And then eventually you're just like, well, I'll just walk to work and be an hour late. I don't care. It doesn't matter anymore. And to me, that's what it is. Like, because every single day you're waking up and you're like, this is your, and one of Rendon was, it's funny because you've got Pujols coming there. You've got the Upton contract. They're notorious for spending big money on the guy who's already crested and coming down the back end of the mountain.
The most unmovable contract in Blue Jays history they wound up unloading thanks to the Los Angeles Angels, Vernon and Wells.
There you go. And it's just, I don't know. It's shocking to me that Rendon literally said after he won the World Series, I don't really care about baseball. I don't even like baseball that much. I'm good at it.
And the Angels were like, you'll fit right in this clubhouse.
Exactly. What does $200 million say? 250. And you're like, do you like it again? And it's like, no, I'm good.
We have a culture here in Anaheim, and that culture is not caring about baseball.
But yeah, no, I even something that all of these guys clearly love and they want to do for the rest of their lives. It's their passion, but you play for Anaheim for long enough and that passion gets beat out of you. You want to win. These guys are all competitive.
Like, look at what it did for Rysel and Iglesias. Sorry, Jen, go ahead there.
No, I was just going to say, these guys are at the ballpark for so many hours every single day, right? Like it's so much more than what fans see. Like, and to be surrounded by an ownership group that doesn't seem to care, doesn't know what they're doing, does players that have lost interest, that has to affect you mentally, even if you don't want it to, right? It does. It has to beat some of that passion out of you.
Yeah, especially when you see how much money they're spending, right? Like, it's because that's the thing, right? You're in that clubhouse and you're like, this isn't a cheap organization. This is just from top to bottom rotten when it comes to decision making.
Well, the last 2 years they've drafted only pitchers, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's so childish. That's like what an 8-year-old would do on his GM fantasy team playing video games. Oh, we need more pitchers, only pitchers. Like, what do you have coaches on your team that are sitting there like, okay, so what new crop of players are we gonna teach this year? What guys did you bring us for us to teach? Oh, well, we're not drafting hitters. We're not drafting anybody in the field this year or next year. So whatever you're going to be teaching to players, you're not going to be really doing that because we're not bringing in players. Like that seems so mentally out to lunch that you would skip on players. Literally 50% of the league, 50% of what you're available and looking at, you're like, we're not drafting that. It's like, you take that talent and you turn it into pitching. You take the most talented person available, and then your front office goes out there, looks at what everybody else has, and they turn it into a team. No, we don't. We're just looking at pitching. I can't believe that a team would have that mentality when it comes to draft.
Oh, and the rest of the AL West dunk on them constantly, right? Like the Mariners fans have. I love Mariners Twitter for just that. Just even when they lose, they're at least like, well, we're better than Anaheim. Like
they're pretty easy to make fun of, but I will say I'd take the Angels over the Athletics any day of the week because that's another dumpster fire of an organization.
For totally different reasons.
Totally different reasons.
Totally different reasons. All right. Did anyone else have anything to add about the hopeless Angels? All right. Jen, I'm sure you have several topics for us to comb through.
You know what? It's a really simple one just because I figured baseball season is winding down. And obviously we're all really passionate about baseball. Otherwise we wouldn't be doing what we're doing. So I'm just curious what everybody gets into once the baseball season is officially over.
Ooh, that's a good one.
I'm a diehard Philadelphia Eagles fan, actually. So if the Eagles beat the Cowboys tonight with the Phillies moving on yesterday, that city might burn. That they're insane sports fans. Philadelphia might not exist come Monday.
Personally, I don't know if you guys saw it on Twitter. I only posted about it once, but like I have my little world's smallest record store that I run. But next summer I bought a camper from like 1956. You saw it?
Yeah.
And my record store is going to have a little companion next summer. It's going to be like a vintage clothing store in this like converted like vintage awesome camper. So that's my winter plan. So I'll be working on that, trying to get it like restored to, back to its 1956 glory.
Love it, Garth. Sweet. Joel, how about you? What's the movie biz like in the winter, bud?
Movie biz kind of shuts down halfway through November. Then they pretty much the same with television, right? There's those kind of breaks that they have in the middle of the year. But for me, for writing, you go all the way through. You don't stop. When everybody else stops, that just gives you a chance to write something that you're passionate about and not being so much paid for. And right now it's the TV show is wrapped, and I can't believe that we're on our last episode. I still didn't get you guys a clip. But there's that. And then Tommy John is we're really I think he's up for the Veterans Committee in a season and a half. And we're very hopeful that he's at 71 WAR on his career. So we're hoping that he gets brought into the Hall of Fame, and then we can coincide our this biopic that we're making about him to match him kind of going into the Hall of Fame. So, and then a foreign substance documentary is what I'm going to be doing in the off season too. So that's pretty much what's got my time.
Love it, buddy. Just riling up Even more people.
Oh yeah.
And I'll be I don't know, as much as it sucks, the best time for touring for stand-up comics in Canada is the dead of winter when travel is the worst. So I'll be on the road a lot more.
Scott, those 7-hour drives in the middle of the winter are the best thing to make a comedian.
Try and stop me from playing Regina in the middle of February. All right, let's end on Garth's topic here, my dude. What do you got for us?
All right, I'm also not going to talk about baseball. One, you're obviously a football fan. News broke this week that Daniel Snyder is kind of probably blackmailing a bunch of the owners of the league. So I'm thinking, like, with that, because like the owners want him gone, but they can't because he probably has dirt on half of them because they're shady asshole billionaires. But with that scandal, Deshaun Watson, the Brian Flores thing, the John Gruden thing, the concussion thing with Tua, and like going back decades, like, when does a professional sports league hit that tipping point where people are just like, you know what, this thing's corrupt from the core? Like, when are we going to start seeing people like, because I've checked out this year. I was a huge fan. I was a Green Bay Packers fan. I fucking love Brett Favre, who is an absolute piece of dog shit. When does the NFL or any sports league that has this many like major scandals, when does it start hurting them? So yeah, I just kind of want to know where you guys feel about the NFL and just how like insane it is. Like, no one even really cares about football right now. It's just these massive scandals that are going to have huge ramifications.
Yeah, I agree with you, man. The NFL has such a bad reputation in light of all sports. If you compare it to any of the other big ones, right? MLB, NHL, NBA, nothing in those other leagues is compared to what's going on in the NFL. But even just like being down here living in the States, nothing is going to change. I promise you, the consumerism and the business side of football down here is absolutely mental. And it doesn't matter what scandals continue to roll out. I'm sure there'll be more. Nothing will change the fandom of the NFL down here, and it's insane and it's sad. They should be held to a higher standard, and are not.
Can they rebuild Hockey Canada? Can they help rebuild Hockey Canada?
But the thing is, like, the thing with the Snyder deal, it's like, this could be big, because like he has had about 5 or 6 major scandals with his football team in the last decade, and he still owns the team. And everybody is like, well, how, like in the NBA, like with Donald Sterling and like even the guy from owns the Phoenix Suns now, he's selling the team, but they're kind of forcing him out. In the NFL, like, this guy is garbage. Daniel Snyder is one of the worst human beings, like documented, one of the worst human beings on the planet. And they still won't get rid of him. So like, what happens if they kind of force their hand and say, oh, like, you have to sell the team? Like, what happened? It comes out that, like, I don't know, fucking Robert Kraft like drinks baby blood or something. Like, there's probably some pretty dark shit that's gonna drop. And like the whole thing with Gruden's taking them to court because of Washington, because of the bad emails that were sent by Gruden. Those are the only things that came out in the whole Washington thing. Like I think in the next couple of years, there's legitimately going to be some terrifying shit that comes out about the NFL.
I'm curious what you had to say, Jen. It looked like you kind of popped up there.
I love sports. I absolutely love sports. Between Colin Kaepernick, concussions, and the way that the league responds to domestic and sexual abuse allegations, I have not been able to watch the NFL. And every year I tell myself, maybe I'll give it a try. Maybe I'll try watching again this year, right? Everybody's watching My Twitter is filled with it. There's no baseball. Let's try. And every year there's something else. Okay. So let's say talk Tua, for instance, right? What happened with Tua? And I just morally, ethically, I cannot bring myself to consume their product. And I agree with Juan. I lived in the US for 1 year. I lived in North Carolina, and the love for football, the NFL, that whole culture is so ingrained. It wouldn't matter, I don't think, at this point, what owners do, what players do, any of it. That fandom is going to remain. I don't know exactly what the NFL would have to do.
Fucking Deshaun Watson got $250 million.
I can't. I won't. I won't watch.
Like, why aren't people just losing their minds over that shit?
Because people.
Oh, he got an 11-game suspension. He also got more guaranteed money than Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers or Patrick Mahomes. I can't watch that league anymore. And
too many people don't care about domestic and sexual abuse to begin with.
I was just going to say football culture bleeds into life pretty quick there. And I think that's the true crux of the whole thing we're talking about right now. It goes a lot deeper than football, and that's why football gets a pass.
Yeah. But it's
in the Supreme Court.
But it seems
it's
like
the president.
It seems like it's the only sports league that doesn't at least try to show the appearance that they give a shit. They just don't. They're just we're the biggest sports league. We don't care. In baseball, at least, with domestic violence, when Asuna got caught in Toronto, we couldn't ship him out fast enough.
Mm-hmm.
We're just nah, cut ties, get him the fuck out. In the NFL, it's you know what? We're going to sign him to the richest contract in league history. And not only that, we're going to make his first year of the contract only $1 million. So when he's suspended for that year, he only loses $1 million of his 230.
But as much as Toronto was willing to ship out Osuna, there were teams chomping at the bit to take him.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Aroldis Chapman, so on and so forth.
Do you guys think that Chapman gets a contract?
Oh.
Yeah.
He will. Somebody will sign him.
I don't know. He was terrible this year.
I was going to say he had a terrible season. And that if he had a very good season or even just a decent season, 100% he would get signed.
But
having had the bad season, I still think there might be a team who takes him, and I really don't know why they would.
105 mile an hour Aroldis Chapman is a lot more enticing than 96 mile an hour Aroldis Chapman. I think he's done.
Maybe
the Angels will sign him.
And on that, let's close this up. Nice tight bow there. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us on Long Toss. Everyone in the YouTube, really appreciate it. If you are, for whatever reason, 2 hours into this thing and have yet to hit the like button or subscribe, please do so. Jen, thank you so much for joining us. Where on Twitter can the folks find you?
You can find me at baseball_Jen, and that is Jen with 2 N's.
Garth, where can they find you on Twitter, my dude?
Same thing, Garth Orgy. What else do I got going on? I'm on Instagram, same thing. Yeah. I just talk about baseball cards there, which I'm also sent you guys each a pack of the Garth Orgy's wax packs.
Very exciting. Thanks, buddy.
So you and Adam got one in the mail. It should be coming any day now.
Love it.
Series 1 sold out first day. So Series 2 is probably coming very soon.
Very cool. All right. Hey, Kami, Joel, where can people find you, my dude?
Yeah, right there. Hey, Kami on TikTok. Just, you know me and my
out there getting views, right? Riling folks up. I get it.
That's right. You got to poke the bear.
Juan Forno, do you have any gigs coming up, buddy, where people can go see you?
Yeah, I got plenty of stuff going on. You can follow me at Juan Forno Comedy on Instagram. Anybody who's watching or ends up watching this, just know I'm 10 times funnier than Scott. No, I'm kidding. I open for Scott. But I got gigs coming up. I'm doing the Roundtable Theater next Saturday in Seattle. And then hopefully having my first debut special come out in the springtime of next year. So a lot of exciting stuff coming up.
Awesome. Thank you so much, all four of you, for joining us for the whole time here. Much love to you. We're going to just end it here. Adam's got the quit live thing, so we'll just use this as our goodbyes. And yeah, we'll be in touch. Later, gang.
See you next season.
See you guys.